Hello everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the Damage Counter YouTube channel. Today I'm going to give you guys a breakdown of just my tournament run at NAIC, the deck I played, choices I made, reasons for cards in the list, and we'll go through each round, round by round, and we'll talk about how some of those games went, how some of the matchups went, and all that kind of good stuff. So, let's go ahead and jump in with things here. Of course, as always, if you listened to the podcast, you knew that I was going into this event playing Sylveon Toolbox. It is my all-time favorite deck in the format. I've said it several times on the podcast. I won't belabor the point here. It's a deck that I have played for about 8-9 months straight at this point. So I am very familiar with the deck. I'm very comfortable with it. And, I figured if I was going to NAIC, I might as well just play what I'm comfortable with. And, it also helps that I have fun with this list and all that kind of good stuff as well. So, one of my big goals going into NAIC, and I mentioned this on the podcast, throughout the Brilliant Stars format, I was using a list that was very derivative of what Ty Nugent got 6th with at EUIC. Every list I played in Brilliant Stars was very close to whatever he was doing at the time. And so when Astral Radiance came around, I said, okay, I want to homebrew a deck. So, we're still hitting a lot of beats from what Ty did in the Brilliant Stars meta. But, there's new cards, it's a new meta game, and we kind of have to, play the game differently. We have to think about our decks a little differently. So all of this is pretty much homebrew. I took inspiration here and there from other lists, other Sylveon lists, other Arceus lists, but for the most part, a lot of these decisions were, in fact, I can tell you all of these decisions were made of my own fruition except for the Ditto, but we'll get to that in just a second. So let's go ahead and break down the list. If you're not familiar with what the Sylveon Toolbox deck is all about, well, it's just that. It's a toolbox. So you see we have all these different Pokemon in here: Arceus, Octillery, Sylveon, Ditto, Empoleon, Mightyena. All of these Pokemon in here serve different purposes and different matchups, and your game plan is never really linear. Like whatever you do in a game basically changes like all the time. Like it's never like the same. Okay, got to get this attacker set up, got to get my engine set up. Like no, it's it'll change depending on the matchup type thing, right? So. For those that don't know, Sylveon VMAX has the attack max harmony, 3 colorless energy, 70 damage, and it does an additional 30 damage for each different type on your bench. And that's kind of the linchpin of the deck. Sylveon kind of holds everything together just through that attack alone. And of course, we have Arceus here to help us with some consistency. It's a broken card. It's so good. 3 colorless energy, Trinity Nova for 200 damage. And you can accelerate 3 basic energy from your deck to your Pokemon in any way you like. Your Pokemon V, sorry. And of course, the Starbirth ability, once per game, you can just search your deck for 2 cards. Insanely broken ability, and really helps give Sylveon the consistency that it needs, because this deck can be a little bricky sometimes. So that's really good. Octillery is here to help in that regard as well. We do play a lot of Rapid Strike Pokemon, and just Rapid Strike cards in general. Sylveon, the Octillery itself, Empoleon, Urshifu, and then of course we've got the Rapid Strike Energy, the Tower of Waters, and a little bit of draw support thanks to Karina. So we got a little bit of a Rapid Strike search engine going there as well. Crobat to help us draw some cards. Urshifu and Empoleon kind of leaning into that Rapid Strike box. Empoleon was a card I almost cut for this list. It's very good into Regis, so long as they don't play Path. You just shut down the Regi deck entirely just by leaving Empoleon in the active, which is really good. Empoleon also serves as a Miltank counter, as it'll turn off the Miraculous Body ability while Empoleon is active, which is really helpful. So Empoleon is definitely a cool card, and it definitely did pull its weight. I'm not going to lie to you. And, we'll cover more of that as we get into the breakup on the rounds, or the breakdown on the rounds. But yeah, Empoleon V was definitely really good. And I think in my personal opinion, I think Empoleon V is actually a lot more consistent in Sylveon than it is in other lists, just because you have the ability to run the Rapid Strike energy and use Empoleon V's Swirling Slice attack as an alternative method to set up Sylveon, Urshifu, or really any other attacker in your list. So I think if you really like Empoleon, I think Sylveon is actually the perfect deck for it. But I know some people are a little back and forth on how they feel about Empoleon in the meta right now. The Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. I feel like this is kind of a no-brainer for a Sylveon list. You know, Sylveon's a Rapid Strike Pokemon. We can lean into the Rapid Strike package, and Urshifu is easily the best Rapid Strike card ever printed. Easily up there as one of the best Pokemon cards ever printed. Gale Thrust for 1 energy, doing 150 damage if it became active that turn. And then Gale Thrust, Gmax Rapid Flow for 2 fighting energy and a colorless. You can deal 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Very good for cleaning up games. Very good for getting the early shutdown on like Inteleon engines and all that kind of good stuff. A very, very good attack. Very broken. So kind of felt like a no-brainer in here. We're running a 1-1 count just because fighting type has become a lot less prominent in this metagame. Mew VMAX is starting to tumble. It's starting to see a little less play. But, so are a lot of fighting weak Pokemon, strangely enough. Obviously, that could change with Palkia being a huge force in this metagame. That means more lightning type attackers might come about, which means fighting type will become good again. But for the time being, fighting type is not as great a weakness to hit as it used to be, which is why we're running a 1-1. Still good enough to include it, and of course, like I said, even if it wasn't, Urshifu is just such a broken card that, we should put it in here because it's really good. So, that's Urshifu for you. A couple of the standout picks as far as the Pokemon go, that a lot of people are probably scratching their heads over are the Ditto and the Mightyena. So let's go ahead and start covering those. The Ditto, I took inspiration from Jake Gearhart in the list he played at Milwaukee Regionals. He played Arceus Inteleon with a Ditto VMAX. And the theory behind it being, as the Ditto would be the Palkia counter, so to speak. That way you could just commit fully to water energies. You don't have to do like this weird energy split thing. And then you can just max transform, copy Subspace Swell, and threaten Palkia not only for filling your bench, but also for filling their own. Essentially turning their own attack against them, except you'll have more HP when you use it. So, if you can catch them with a max power Subspace Swell, attach Choice Belt to Ditto VMAX, and you'll take a one-hit KO on Palkia, and then they will not be able to do the same to you in return, at least not without a whole lot more tools, basically. So I took that idea, tried it for myself, didn't get a whole lot of testing with it, before NAIC and the Palkia matchup specifically. Ditto VMAX ended up being really helpful in other matchups in my testing, though. I found it surprisingly helpful in Mew, which I was not expecting, and is also very helpful in the Duraludon matchup, as you can just copy Gmax Pulverization, and you don't need to worry about Path being in play or not. You can still hit it, so that's really good. Even though I didn't really get to test the Palkia matchup before NAIC with Ditto a whole lot, I kind of went in there just trusting my gut on it because it was so valuable in other matchups. Now, unfortunately, in the few Palkia that I did face at the event, unfortunately, just was not able to set up the Ditto VMAX consistently. It's one thing when you play it in Arceus Inteleon, because you're searching your deck all the time. You have a lot more consistency than Sylveon does. So setting up the Ditto VMAX was a little difficult. So that ended up being a bit of a detriment in the Palkia matchup specifically. That's not to say it wouldn't work. It's just, maybe just not for Sylveon. That being said, like I said, the Ditto VMAX did end up being really helpful later on in the day. I did end up facing against a Duraludon player in the Ditto VMAX, was super clutch in that matchup, so definitely a good include. This is probably the only Pokemon that I'm kind of like on the fence about currently. May or may not swap the Ditto out back for like a lightning attacker of some sort, but we'll just have to wait and see. The final Pokemon I want to talk about is the Mightyena, and its inclusion may be obvious to some of you, but if you're not aware, the Mightyena has an attack or an ability, has the ability Hustle Bark. If your opponent has any Pokemon VMAX in play, this Mightyena can attack for 3 colorless less, and its only attack, Reckless Tackle, is 3 colorless energy, wouldn't you know, and it deals 160 damage and 50 damage to itself. So the Mightyena is my Mew counter. A lot of Sylveon lists are still opting to use like Galarian Moltres and Crobat VMAX, and I certainly don't blame them. I've done a lot of testing with Mightyena the moment Astral Radiance came out, and the theory behind that was that essentially I can run the 1-1 Mightyena. Early in testing I was running 2-1, but 1-1 works just fine. I can run the 1-1 Mightyena, and then I can streamline my energy counts. That way I can run purely water energy, which is going to make the Melanie a lot more consistent. Or yeah, the Melanie play is a lot more consistent just in general. And, I thought it was going to boost consistency in that way. And in my testing, I was pleasantly surprised to find that to be the case. On occasion, the Mightyena can be a little difficult to set up, but seeing how it is instrumental in the Mew matchup, it is not at all a waste to, use your Starbirth to help you set it up. That way you can KO a Mew VMAX very easily. The only snag in that game plan is that if the Mew player does play Oricorio and have that on bench, then you will need the Choice Belt to take the KO on the Mew VMAX still. So there is a little bit of a snag in that play there, but still entirely possible. I found that more often than not, I was able to get that off. So I do think the Mightyena is the best Dark-type attacker for Sylveon, and I think it's being slept on a lot, but if you wanted to stick with the tried and true Crobat VMAX Galarian Moltres, I would not blame you. On top of that, the Mightyena also serves as a pretty good one-prize attacker in VMAX matchups. And I do think that's one of the things that Sylveon was severely lacking in the Brilliant Stars meta. If you go back and look at the Brilliant Stars meta, you'll notice that a lot of the top decks had very solid one-prize attacking options. Mew had Meloetta, Arc Intel had Inteleon, Arc Beedrill had Beedrill. Basically all of the top decks in the Brilliant Stars format had one prize attackers to offset prize trade, as well as still, while still putting meaningful damage on the board. And that's something that Sylveon lacked in the Brilliant Stars meta. There just wasn't really any good one prizers for the list. And I think Mightyena fills that role very well. So if you're looking to play Sylveon, I would highly recommend looking at Mightyena as your Dark-type option. But again, if you decide to play Crobat VMAX or Galarian Moltres V, again, that's still perfectly valid, and I would not blame you at all. With the Pokemon out of the way, I want to talk about the supporter lineup. It's fairly standard stuff. 2 boss, that's fairly standard. You want to boss, KO certain things. Karina's Focus is a really good card in the list. Of course, you can just tutor for it thanks to Rapid Strike Search. So if you ever need to draw some cards, all you have to do is just declare Rapid Strike Search, search it out, draw some cards, you're good to go. And it's also this deck's failsafe to Roxanne, essentially, as Rapid Strike Search cannot be turned off by Path to the Peak, of course, because Octillery is not a rule box Pokemon. You do have to worry about, of course, your Octillery potentially getting knocked out, or against any Jolteon Memory Capsule decks. However, I've found that, the Jolteon is not super popular in this metagame for whatever reason. So I feel like that's something you really don't have to worry about. So yeah, if you get Rock Sand, you have a way out of it. You can just go Rapid Strike Search for Karina. Not the best thing in the world. Obviously, you would prefer not to use a supporter to get out of that, but not the worst thing in the world either. 2 Melanie, of course, to set up the Melanie play. I know Ty, both in Brilliant Stars and in National Radiance, has been more privy to just run the 1 and maybe put a Pal Pad in place of the second one. I prefer the second Melanie. I just like having the extra out to it personally. That's just me, and it's worked out very much for me, being able to go Rapid Flow, Melanie attach, Rapid Flow, and if I'm just that kind of lucky and find the second Melanie, I can do it again. And that kind of wreaks havoc on a lot of boards or sets up like board states that your opponent may not have been expecting. So I do like the second Melanie. Avery, of course, is just a broken card in this format. Slows down Palkia, which is really good. Can slow down Mew, which is really good. Can punish Regis, which is also really good. I would like to run more than one copy of Avery in the list than one, but unfortunately, we just don't have that kind of space. The 2 Marnie, I really, for basically my entire testing period, I was running 1 Marnie, 1 Roxanne, and I think I even piloted a list with that count to Card Trooper. But what I found is that, I just wasn't finding the Roxanne when I need it. Again, this is not an Inteleon list, so, you're not able to just Shady Dealings Roxanne for the perfect moment. You just kind of have to hope you find it, and when it's a one-of card, that's asking a lot. So I decided to go with the 2 Marnie, and then just, take the L if I was ever in a position where Roxanne would have been way better. And I think that did happen in one game where I was like, man, I really wish I had Roxanne, but it is what it is. I was favoring consistency of the hand disruption rather than, just hoping on blind luck that I found the one-of copy when I went down to 3 prize cards remaining. So it is what it is. I don't think it's really wrong to go either way, but this is just how I preferred to do it. And of course, you have the one-of Peonia. We have a lot of really weird Pokemon counts, a lot of one-of cards in here for a list that can't really pluck them out of the deck. So being able to pluck the important ones out of prize cards when you need it is incredibly important. So Peonia is a very good card for the list. Managed to find room for 4 Battle VIP Pass. You definitely can run 3. A lot of the lists in my early testing and just about every list I was playing in Brilliant Stars ran 3, and it worked very well, more consistently than you might think. But, if you can get 3 to work consistently in a list like this, then 4 just is even better. And can vouch. If you can play 4 in Sylveon and still have room for everything that you want in the list, I would highly recommend it. It is incredibly powerful to just fill out your board just in a singular turn like that. Like, it's an incredibly powerful thing to do. So, would highly recommend. Of course, you got the 4 Ultra Ball, 3 Quick Ball. We want to try to maximize Pokemon Search as much as possible, as this is a toolbox deck. We want to make sure we have all the tools we need for the matchup available to us at any given moment. So, trying to maximize the ball search as much as possible there. Instead of going 4 Quick Ball, I decided to go with 3 Quick Ball and 1 Hisuian Heavy Ball. Again, our Pokemon counts are a little weird, and we got a couple one-ofs in there, a couple that are pretty important. Crobat, Ditto, Empoleon, Poochyena, and Urshifu. If any of those one-ofs are stuck in the prizes, well, that's just it. They're stuck. So Hisuian Heavy Ball can get them out of there so that you can start setting them up much sooner. I did have a game against a Miltank deck where it was basically, it was my turn 2. I had an Arceus V-Star set up. I went Trinity Nova. I was like, cool, let me just get the energy for, the Trinity Nova and the Pokemon I need to set up. In this case was Empoleon. I was looking through the deck and realized that the Empoleon was prized. I said, okay, no problem. Just grab the Hisuian Heavy Ball, play it, pluck Empoleon out of the prizes, Trinity Nova, power it up, and we're good to go. So definitely a broken card in this list. Definitely want to run that. A couple other standard things, 2 switch, 1 choice belt, 1 evolution incense. Choice belt's extra damage is phenomenal, of course. The extra mobility from switch never hurt. I opted to go for switch instead of air balloon, just in case there were any Tapu Koko decks running around. I don't think that there were. I think the more popular lightning type of choice in the meta is Flying Pikachu, but still switch ended up being totally serviceable. Evolution Incense is like the most broken card you can Dream Gift for on turn 1. Basically getting a Sylveon into play, going Dream Gift for Evolution Incense, and then guaranteeing Starbirth on your next turn, assuming your opponent doesn't play a turn 1 Marnie. Cannot be slept on. It just adds a ton of consistency to the list. And the Evolution Incense is nice when you just don't have the hand to play an Ultra Ball in the following turn, so definitely good there. Tool Jammer, with that over Big Charm, just to try to have the best of both worlds. In my testing around that time, these turbo decks were starting to gain popularity. Dialga V-Star had won a lot of online tournaments. We saw the turbo Palkia list appear out of nowhere at the top 8 in Melbourne. So Tool Jammer was kind of my half-hearted way to deny Choice Belt, effectively giving me the extra 30 HP that would normally come from Big Charm instead of Tool Jammer. Kind of like having that, like a soft version of that, while being able to shut off things like air balloons to punish the turbo lists and all that kind of good stuff. Didn't really work out that way. Didn't run into any turbo lists, actually. So the Tool Jammer was just a less effective Big Charm, but it is what it is. Plus 30 HP versus turning off the 30 damage from Choice Belt. More or less the same thing, so I don't think it was a bad call here. Of course, 2 path, 1 tower. Pretty standard stadium count for Sylveon. Turn off abilities to give you that extra edge in the Mew matchup, as well as, the extra mobility from tower. It's always good. 6 water energy, 2 double colorless, and 3 rapid strike energy. Opted to go heavier on Rapid Strike as I wanted to lean more on basically my Rapid Strike Pokemon. I thought Sylveon, Urshifu, and Empoleon were much more important Pokemon in the game, at least more consistently. I've gone back and forth whether or not I want to swap that 3rd Rapid Strike energy for Double Turbo. The main thing keeping me from doing it is I want to Rapid Flow as consistently as possible. And I also would rather not apply the -20 to Sylveon VMAX as much as I possibly can, because that -20 on Sylveon is a big, big deal. I'll be the first to admit that even without double turbo energy, Sylveon VMAX is already not hitting for the best numbers. So attaching double turbo and nerfing your damage further, I hate it. I hate it a lot. So I opted to go with 3 Rapid Strike, and I'll probably keep that for now. You could make the argument to just go even on Rapid Strike and Double Turbo and then just throw in an extra basic, or, use that cut card for something else. I've done that in the past, and I'm not a fan. More often than not, I struggle to find both Rapid Strike and Double Turbo in that scenario. So I'm not a fan of that approach. But if it works for you, hey, it works for you. So that's the list. That's kind of the nitty gritty of the list. Overall, I think it's a fantastic list. Personally, like I said, I after NAIC, after having played the 9 rounds, I'm back and forth on a few things. Like I said, I am probably going to swap out Ditto for a lightning type attacker just to get that extra type and that extra. That extra kind of insurance against Palkia, for lack of a better term, as Palkia is a matchup that Sylveon struggles with quite a bit, as well as a few other things in the list. But for the most part, I think it was solid for the event at NAIC. I think a lot of things in here were a good call. And let's go ahead and take a look at my pairings and talk about the matchups I had to deal with specifically, so you guys can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So here we got the RK9 pairings. Let me zoom in here a little bit. You guys can read those names a little bit better. There we go. So we'll start from the bottom here. Round 1. First round of the event was against Austin Bentheimer. He was playing an Arceus Flying Pikachu list. This was a deck that I had not tested against a whole bunch. I had played it against it in a few online tournaments, and I was like, okay, I have options against this. I don't think I really need to tech for it specifically. Like, Sylveon has the tools to deal with this matchup, even without, trying to hit it for weakness. So I was like, okay, well, let's try it out. And, in retrospect, part of me wished I might have teched for this a little bit more because I ran into quite a few Arceus Flying Pikachu. It was a very popular deck at this event, but regardless, as you see round 1, we took a loss here. Austin honestly was just playing phenomenally. From the discussions we had, he is a player that's played for quite a while. He knows what he's doing. And I had quite a few major misplays in that round. And that's not to take anything away from him, of course. It's just kind of how things worked out. There was a very pivotal moment where I thought I was getting a KO on an active Arceus V-Star with VMAX Rapid Flow, as well as a KO on something on the bench, or setting up something. I don't fully remember what I was hitting on the bench, but either way. But I had done my math wrong, and it turns out I was not KOing the Arceus V-Star in active. So that Rapid Flow hit a 2-prizer in active for weakness and did not knock it out. And it hit the Flying Pikachu on the bench, only doing 120 damage. So it was just kind of a really rough, really feels bad kind of misplay. And that was in game 2, so it kind of like shook me for the rest of the game. And, at that point, like, I didn't have any energy on board. Like, I was really, really kind of banking on taking that KO there and setting up the Flying Pikachu for a KO later. And it just, things just didn't work out, and ended up losing that round pretty handily. But, it is what it is. We went up into round 2. I said, okay, got to get my mojo back, got to get my head in the game. We started to go on a little bit of a win streak here, but we get to round 2, and we did have a win over Jonathan Scott. He was just playing an Arceus build. If I remember correctly, I think it was like an Arceus B-Barrel list. It had the Crobat, it had the Jolteon. So, I know I just said that Jolteon hasn't seen a ton of play, but Jonathan here was playing it. He had an unfortunate game 1 where he started Eevee and went Attach Pass. Now, I wasn't able to donk him, unfortunately, but, when you have a turn like that, you didn't get Arceus out turn 1. You got energy turn 1, but not where you wanted it. So it was a really rough position for him game 1. Game 2 was much closer. He had a much better setup. He was going first and was, giving me a run for my money, but eventually was able to close it out by going boss on a Crobat V and then going Rapid Flow for 3 prizes to end the game pretty handedly there. So, kind of that unfortunate game 1, and, being able to clutch things out with Rapid Flow in the second game got us that second win, or that first win in the second round. And, my confidence started going. I was like, okay. We're good. We're in there. We're chilling. Let's keep playing. Round 3 went up against William Crawford here. And he probably had the most interesting deck I've probably played all weekend. He was playing Crobat VMAX with Miltank. Essentially, the idea was using Stealth Poison to attack, poison, and then retreat into Miltank, and then hide behind it, essentially. Thankfully, I made the decision to leave my Miltank counters in the deck. I decided to respect the cow this weekend, and I'm glad I did, because Empoleon absolutely carried me through that matchup. I don't believe... I don't know for certain, but in our 2 games, he was not playing... or he didn't drop a single path. so he was not really able to get around the Miltank in any way, which was unfortunate for him. Like I said, I don't know if he did play Path or not. Maybe he did and just never found it or couldn't drop it at any time. But, if Path doesn't enter play, then Empoleon is free to just go Swirling Slice on a Miltank and take the KO. No problem whatsoever. So, the Empoleon tech was really good, carried us there. And, after we took care of the Miltanks, Urshifu was in the back, ready to take out the Crobats. So pretty good matchup for us there. Things just really worked out for us, and it was a pretty good game, and definitely the most interesting list that I had seen all weekend. Now after lunch, we go into round 4. I went up against Robert Rood. He was playing yet another. It was another flying Pikachu list. His list was pretty interesting because it had a dark package with it as well, which I know isn't uncommon. Sliding in that dark package so you have a little bit of extra, or you have an extra answer against Mew, of course, is always fantastic. What was interesting about his list is that his dark package actually comprised of Umbreon, V and VMAX, which is really interesting. And I do think that Umbreon is being pretty slept on in this meta, if I'm being honest. I personally think Umbreon's been slept on ever since Brilliant Stars came out, but that's neither here nor there. It was a pretty interesting list, but in both games he was having some pretty bad draws off of the Bibarel, and I was able to. I think game 1 I played 3 Battle VIP Pass on turn 1, and was just able to get set up and run away with things before he was able to do anything. So shout outs to him. It was a fun game, and I appreciate seeing the Umbreon. It was pretty sick. And of course, Mightyena really helped out in that matchup as well. Of course, Flying Pikachu is a VMAX, so using Mightyena to get some good damage on the Pikachu while also potentially forcing my opponent to offset their own prize race was definitely pretty awesome. Now, round 5, we took our second loss of the tournament against Chris DeRocher. I believe that's how you say that name. Man, he went. I'm just now looking at this. He went 6-3, got 18 points. That's pretty awesome, actually. So shout outs to him. Just short of making day 2. Shout outs to him. But it was yet another Arceus flying Pikachu list. I gotta be honest, my memory is a little fuzzy on this one. I don't fully remember how I lost this one. It did go to game 3, I know that much. If I had to guess, I probably didn't have super great opening or like a super great start. In fact, actually, no, it's coming back to me now. I think this was the only time throughout the tournament where like my opening hand was just really bad. like I think it was like open Remoraid, attach pass type bad, or it might have been like open Remoraid and Poochyena or something, something like that. Wasn't really a whole lot going on in that opening hand, turn 1. So, unfortunately, he was able to get set up and run away with it. So, giving me my second loss at this point, one more loss puts me out of contention for day 2, which was my big overarching goal. Of course, as you can see, we played 9 rounds only, so it didn't make it, but we got, this is the best record I've had at an official tournament, so can't really complain with that. Moving on to round 6, went up against Steven Burks. He was playing Regibox. And this was a matchup that I was slightly nervous about. I did play against a lot of Reggie in my testing. There's a lot of people in my local area that was very interested in the deck. And early in testing, this matchup was free because I was running a 2-1 Urshifu line in my early testing. And Urshifu just makes this matchup so easy. You have 220 HP. The only way they can one-shot the Urshifu V is if they get an absurd amount of damage modifiers on the Regigigas, which is asking a lot. It requires even more setup beyond the setup that the Regidecks already have to do. So it's very unlikely that they will one-hit KO the Urshifu V, and of course, if they have a bad setup, that's just more prizes that Urshifu can take before it eventually gets knocked out. But I was nervous about this matchup because I hadn't done a lot of testing against the matchup after I had gone to 1-1 Urshifu. And if you look at everything else in my list, Arceus, Ditto, Sylveon, they are all weak to different types in the Regi box. Arceus and Ditto are weak to Regirock, of course. Don't want to lean on Ditto VMAX because Regigigas can one-shot it. And of course, Sylveon is weak to Registeel and can be one-shot by Regigigas. So it was a matchup that I was a little uncomfortable with, as I hadn't had testing with it late in my testing after I had made my list the way it is. And Empoleon also is weak to Regieleki, which wasn't helping things. But we went into the game and things went really well. Was able to open Empoleon in both games, which is really good. Steven did play Path in his list. But thankfully, and very luckily, Game 1, both of his Path were prized. Game 1, allowing Empoleon to just shut down the deck entirely and just take knockout after knockout after knockout pretty single-handedly, so that was pretty good there. Game 2, Steven did have access to the Path, but unfortunately fell to the weakness of the Regideck, and that sometimes you just can't get set up super consistently, and was able to, take all my prize cards before he was, and, that's just is what it is. So, once again, the Empoleon was coming in clutch. Again, Urshifu is just really good in that matchup, and having the Ditto ready to transform into either Empoleon or Urshifu, whichever one is better for the given scenario in the late game, was also really clutch. Round 7. You've probably listened to me up to this point and wondered, geez, did this man play any Palkia? Yeah, I sure did. My first Palkia matchup was at round 7 against Matthew Browning, who ended up being my highest placing opponent, 29 points. I'm going to have to see what placing he got, because that is a lot of points. I got to see how close he was to top 8. But either way, he was playing Palkia Inteleon, and I got to say, this man was just playing out of his mind. Outside of the match I had against Chris at round 5, this was another scenario where I had games where I was just not setting up as well as I'd have liked, which is especially detrimental against Palkia. In the Palkia matchup, like I said before, this is a matchup that Sylveon struggles with, as, Palkia wants to go wide, Palkia wants you to go wide so that you can, or that they can swing for the maximum amount of damage on Subspace Swell. And unfortunately, it's very difficult for Sylveon to play with a limited bench. And a lot of my testing and a lot of my coaching with Tate Whitesell and Michaela, she runs the Optimal 60 YouTube channel. They were my coaches. Links in the description, by the way. In coaching sessions with them, we agreed that, the play into the Palkia matchup is to just lean very heavily on Arceus and Urshifu and try not to bench anything more aside from that. The only exception was if we were able to go first and establish a very good board state, like I'm talking full bench, turn 1 attached to Arceus type thing, then the play would be to power up the Ditto VMAX and Subspace Swell them instead of, Subspace Swell them with Ditto VMAX before they could do that to us. But the line of play, more often than not, was to just say, hey, I have Arceus, hey, I have Urshifu, let's go. And then just lean on those two. And then eventually filling out the bench to set up late game attackers after they started to get worn down a little bit. Unfortunately, was not able to consistently set that up in our games and took the loss there. So that was me coming out of contention for day 2 at round 7, which, again, stung a little bit because day 2 was my goal. But at the very least, like I said before, this was the highest I've ever placed at an official event at Indianapolis. I knew I was out of the contention for day 2 at round 5 versus being out of the running for day 2 at round 7. So I feel pretty good about that. Going into round 8 was my second Palkia matchup. And no, you are not reading that wrong. I did play against Tord Reklev. He was 4-3 at the start of round 8, just like I was. We had the same record. I'm not 100% sure what his matchups were throughout the day, and I do think one of those losses was from being late to round 4. That could be wrong, but I'm sure he has something on his Twitter talking about his rounds throughout the day, so maybe go check that out. But either way, glad I decided to play out the last 2 rounds because I was not expecting to get to play against Tord. That was pretty awesome. I got absolutely slaughtered. It was a 2-0 for him. Thankfully, at least against him, I was able to get set up the way I wanted to. So, I felt, or at least I had a stronger board against Tord than I did against Matthew, which I guess if I had to pick, I would probably want to have the stronger board against Tord for obvious reasons. He is one of the best to ever do it. Obviously one of the best players in the game. And it was a good game, had a lot of fun. Tord is a super nice guy. So, not really much to say there. Dude played out of his absolute mind, of course. It's Tord freaking Reklev. So, take that for what you will. It was a pretty good experience. But all I really have for that is, I played against Tord. And maybe may or not have caught him off guard with the second Melanie in my list. I don't know. Maybe. But, that's neither here nor there. So that was a fun game, completely unexpected, and probably the highlight of my weekend. And then finally, round 9, played against Anthony Romanello. He was playing Arceus Duraludon, which, for those of you that don't know, is my least favorite matchup with Sylveon. I would rather play against Mew than against Duraludon, I'll just put it that way. Duraludon's a very difficult matchup. Obviously, we are pretty reliant on special energy in the list. We can play without it. That is not impossible thanks to Arceus, thanks to Melanie. It is very possible to play without special energy, but it is a lot harder. And unfortunately, the deck does not have a phenomenal amount of damage output. Usually Arceus swinging for 180 with Trinity Nova. Sylveon usually only hitting like 190 to 220 depending on your bench. So on and so forth. Our numbers aren't fantastic, which means Duraludon is able to heal a lot more effectively, which makes that matchup incredibly difficult. Thankfully, this is one of those scenarios where I was like, thank God I left the Ditto in here because the Ditto was insanely clutch for this matchup. It ended in a tie. It went to time. By the time rounds was, time in the round was done and we were done with the 3 additional turns, we were both in a position where like, if I just had another couple turns, I'd have had it. Because he did have a pretty rough start game 1. I was able to run away with that one. Again, thanks to Ditto VMAX. He managed to bring it back in game 2. And then again, game 3 went to time. And we were both in a scenario where it's like, dude, we just needed like one more turn to take it. So, glad I had the Ditto VMAX. Again, it just really helped. I could go Max Transform, G-Max Pulverization. So even if I was in a scenario where the Ditto was equipped with a double turbo energy, I was at least going to be able to swing for 200 damage. Which is some of the higher numbers that the deck can hit in that matchup, which is obviously really good. But better yet, more often than not, I was able to set up the Ditto VMAX with Arceus, meaning I was able to G-Max Pulverization for the full 220, which was great. And of course, Mighty Anna coming in there, being able to attack for free, dealing 160 damage as a 1-prizer, and basically forcing my opponent to skew their own prize trade, was invaluable. So both of those Pokemon were incredibly valuable in this matchup. Unfortunately, ended it in a tie, so that put my record at NAIC at 441. It's a good record. It's not bad. Kind of like that middle of the road. I mean, this is literally 50% basically. Split the difference at round 9 with a tie. But either way, I'm happy to say, I'm happy to report, I feel like the only time I really misplayed was in round 1. I feel like I was playing 100% for every other round throughout the day. Had a little bit of bad luck here and there, and it happens. Pokemon's a card game. There are luck-based factors, and Sylveon is not exactly the most consistent list. And that's not to say, I feel like I was playing 100%. If I had recorded every game and went back and watched everything, I'm sure there's something I could pick apart and be like, hey, yeah, maybe I could have played a little bit better there. Maybe that would have been better. Obviously, I mean, there's always things like that, but for the most part, I feel like I was playing at 100% throughout rounds 2 through 9, and I'm pretty proud of how things turned out. Ended up getting 392nd place, something like that, 392nd, 397th, something like that. Let me look it up real quick. 397th place out of 1,376 players. Hey, this is just my second event. Indianapolis was the first. I'm pretty okay with that. So that's my tournament report. That's my deck. That's the rounds I had. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of my list? What do you think of Sylveon Toolbox in the Astral Radiance meta? And actually, since Pokemon Go is out now, what do you think of Sylveon in that meta as well? I know Pokemon Go doesn't really shake up anything in the metagame too much, but I mean, hey, let's throw the question out there anyway. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Check out the description for the podcast. Check out the description for the podcast Twitter, as well as my own Twitter. You can follow me there for updates on the podcast, updates on this YouTube channel, and updates for when I go live on my personal Twitch channel. So with that being said, check all of that out. And yeah, thanks for watching. Take it easy.